My roommate subleased his room using Craigslist without telling us. The three of us in the house were all around 22 years old. The guy that sublet the room was 36, unemployed, socially awkward, and a pothead. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He would blare Metallica all day. He would just stay in the house, only leaving at odd hours. Really sketchy. Then one day my roommate noticed his guitar was missing, and then another guitar was missing. We confronted him. After about 20 minutes of bullshit excuses, he admitted he pawned them for the power bill, and he wouldn't have rent for us. We called the police so we could report the stolen guitars, since you need to have a report to get anything from a pawn shop back. It turns out he already had a warrant out for his arrest for the same shit a town over. Anyway, the cops confronted him in our house while he was frantically trying to get all his stuff packed. He was coming down the stairs with all his luggage when the cops asked him to step outside. Right before he went outside to talk to the cops, he said, "Don't take any of my shit," in what I think was a joking manner. Either way, he was arrested, and we put it on the curb. Good times. I had an entertainment center advertised, and a woman asked to come over to have a look at it. We set up a time, and when the time came, she didn't show up. I texted her, and a couple hours later she replied and asked if it was too late to come by. It was 10 p.m., but I said okay. She said she would be there in 10 minutes, but wasn't there 20 minutes later, and I texted her again. 10 more minutes, she said. But she hadn't shown up by 11 p.m., so I texted again and said we would have to do it another day, and she replied that she was just pulling up. I go to my front door, and sure enough, she is pulling into the driveway, and there are about 4 or 5 other people in the car with her. They all get out and start walking towards the door, and I ask them what they are doing, and the woman says they all want to see the entertainment center. I told her that only she can come in, and at that point I wasn't sure I even wanted her to. She says she needs at least one other person's opinion. I say no. She gets indignant, and I ask her to leave, and she says that I am not being a very good Christian. I say I'm fine with that, and went into my house and locked all the doors, peeking out the window. One of the dudes who was with her is pissing at the end of my driveway, but then they get in the car and drive away. The whole thing was super bizarre. Was moving out of an apartment that had washer and dryer hookups into one that did not. So I sold my washer and dryer. Ended up having separate buyers. Guy who bought the dryer was great. He was getting it for his daughter who was going to college. I helped him load it up in his truck. He gave me the payment, and I never heard from him again. The guy who bought the washer was a different story. I got a text from him, asking if it was still available. We haggled the price, all normal stuff. We set a time, and I waited for him to get there. Now, I only had 1 week left in the apartment, so I didn't care too much about random people coming to my home like I normally would. Pretty much all of my stuff was moved into my new place, but the internet wasn't turned on yet, so I was still just sleeping on an air mattress in the old one for the time being. He ended up being a few hours late and showed up in a truck that was used for transporting large glass panes. He had like 5 people with him, all crammed onto the front bench seat of the truck. They loaded it onto the truck with it leaning at a 30-degree angle against the glass pane rack, or whatever you would call it. He tried to haggle it down to a lower price, but I didn't budge. He left and I thought it was done. Later that night I started getting texts from him about how it doesn't work, and he wants his money back. I told him as it was written in the post that it was sold as is, and was working. I assume he damaged it from the way he rigged it on his truck. Well, after a day he starts calling me and cussing me out, texting death threats, and I have other random numbers calling me doing that same. 2 nights after I sold it, I woke up at 3 a.m. with people banging on my door yelling. Luckily I lived on the 2nd floor with no easy access to the windows. I sat there for about 15 minutes while they continued to yell through the door. The next day I moved the rest of my stuff into my new apt and never went back other than to turn the keys in. I still got calls and texts from him on random numbers for 2 months over a $150 washer. I don't sell stuff on Craigslist anymore. Posted a few items for free, with the ad stating the items were sitting on my front porch. I would check every 15 minutes and remove the ad when they had been claimed. I also stated I had a newborn infant sleeping in the house and asked people not to knock or ring the doorbell, as it would cause my dogs to bark and wake the child. I checked frequently, and in about 45 minutes, the items were gone. I immediately removed the ad and resumed my viewing of The Watchmen. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rings. I hush the dogs and reluctantly answer my front door. It's a large Larry the Cable Guy-esque guy, wearing a trucker cap that read "Deer Hunting." He states he is there for the items I posted for free. I proceed to explain that the items have already been claimed, and he becomes very angry, saying that he drove 45 minutes to pick them up. As he's shouting at me, he looks into my living room and sees my TV screen. Paused, and on glorious display on my 60-inch TV is Dr. Manhattan's glowing blue wang. Clearly not familiar with the series, and presumably not a fan of comics, Mr. Deer Hunting instantly changes moods from angry to disgusted. He says, "Boy, what the fuck is that on your television? You watching some Smurf porn or some kind of shit like that? And you said you got a baby in the house. I ought to call those government people and have them take that poor little baby away from you, you damn pervert." No, that's not a typo. He pronounced it pervert. I promptly thanked him and closed the door. I needed a new roommate quickly, and eventually settled on this chick from Florida who was moving out to San Diego. She initially came off as a little goofy and naive over the phone, but in person she was just strange. She had no sense for personal boundaries, would eat all my food, use my laptop in my room when I wasn't home to go on plentyoffish.com, and would barge into my room when I had friends over to say the weirdest shit, all in the first week. She did and said a ton of weird things in the month she lived with me. She started hanging out with a coworker from Subway along with her coworker's boyfriend who just got out of jail and 4 of his friends. They really only came around because she would buy stuff, and they laughed at the dumb shit she would do and say. She would always leave the window cracked because she lost her keys a lot, and would talk about how she did that all the time. Anyway, her friends broke into the house, stole my TV, my laptop, the smaller TV I had in my room, this wedding dress my aunt wanted me to sell on eBay for her, a bunch of DVDs, and my prescription glasses. I called her freaking out, and she was just getting home and she said she had called the cops on ME because her broken laptop got stolen and suggested I took all my stuff out of the apartment to steal her crappy broken laptop. Cops came and pulled me aside and told me she seemed unstable and suggested I don't use Craigslist for roommates anymore. I had her backed against the wall and was screaming at her with my finger in her face when the cops walked in. I thought I was screwed when they saw that, but after talking to her for 5 minutes, they seemed to understand my frustration with her. The cops just took down what was stolen, and I took her key away and put her 1 box of crap outside the apartment. I eventually got my stuff back on my own because I made up some bullshit about having hidden cameras, and I wouldn't show them to the cops if I got all my stuff back. Somehow that worked.